2, 3, 4.
Over the years, immigrant artists have brought to our community a variety of backgrounds, experiences, and approaches to how you would think about doing art in the Okanagan. They bring a new set of eyes, and they're in a position to blend their own culture with ours through art.
I was born in Russia, born and raised there, went to university there, and then I moved to Germany to study languages. I was also working on my PhD, and I was in a music program, so I was exploring my music interests. And then from Germany, I moved to Canada. So being received into the community, I felt very, very welcomed. Just in Canada in general, even traveling here, you just feel how open people are to different cultures, how many immigrants there are, and even the fact that immigrants are able to have good jobs and have good positions and really kind of make things happen for themselves. I work at West Bank First Nation now, and that was just such a unique thing again for me. You know, I lived in Canada for a while and I thought I know my way around, I know the community, but then I get that job with West Bank First Nation and it's just totally different. It's like a different world again, and there's so much culture, so much tradition. So people that I work with, my students, are people who are experiencing barriers to finding employment, to keeping a job, finding a job. And really, you kind of think, okay, what do I have to teach them? Who am I? But I think I was in a very similar situation because I had to start from nowhere. I came to this country and I didn't have anything, I didn't know anybody. So I had to figure it all out, how the system works, how do you get jobs, how do you meet people, how do you network, how do you get ahead. And all that was new for me, so I think just the fact that I learned it when I was an adult, it's easier to teach somebody something when you learned it, when you're aware of how you learned it and what exactly you did. Because when you're just a kid growing up here, and then you take those things for granted, you take your friends for granted, you take your job for granted, you take your networking contacts for granted. You just know all those people, but you don't maybe even think that you could ask them to help you find a job, right? So for me, it was all new, so it's kind of fresh. So I think I can share.
I'll keep you warm while you keep me company. A little bird, stay with me.
In my opinion, immigrant artists, newcomer artists, I think have added quite a bit, and they're adding more as time goes on to the Okanagan Valley's cultural and arts sector. For a long time, we were a very isolated community, and people had to have a very good reason to be coming here. But I think since roads opened, since the airport went in, since the mid-20th century, it's been more accessible, the Okanagan has been. And so you have people coming here, perhaps they were trained as artists elsewhere. You have people like Geert Moss, for example, who works in Kelowna, who has a sculpture garden. He is a Dutch artist. You have somebody like Sveva Keitani, whose family is from Rome, and they relocated to the Okanagan. And in Vernon, there's a Keitani Cultural Center. In Summerland, you have the George Riga Center, and George Riga has been very, very important in writing in the Okanagan. And so I think you're beginning to find people like that who've chosen to come to the Okanagan, bringing whatever their practice is with them. And as the population explodes, it's exploding, I think, you have more and more people coming, both from without Canada, but from within as well. Many, many people from Quebec. So there's a Centre Culturel Français here, which I think is very important. It's very, very active in having exhibitions of artists who are French-speaking. And it particularly shows how many artists there are from elsewhere working in the Okanagan who are French-speaking, because they have a fairly steady series of exhibitions.
My upbringing in Russia was pretty strict. I was supposed to become a classical pianist because my uncle and my aunt are both classically trained pianists, and my uncle is pretty famous in Europe. So that was the path I was supposed to take. And I went through the whole Russian school training in piano, and I realized that it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I was kind of more drawn to something a little more modern. I also wanted to write my stuff. I didn't just want to sit there for 8 hours and practice, practice, practice. So maybe I was a little lazy too, I don't know. But my parents, they sang a lot of songs, and in Russia, like the gypsy songs are very big. So it's called romance. It's kind of like an art song. And yeah, it's very, very, like when you hear it, it's very European sounding. So my parents were singing lots of those, and then my classical training, and I kind of felt something is missing. I still need to do something else. So then when I moved to Germany, I got into jazz because that was just so weird and so different, and all those different rhythms and different harmonies that I've never heard before. And it was just such a weird experience. It was a challenge. So I got involved with an a cappella group. It was called Point 7. So we traveled through Germany and was singing all that jazz. And then I took some jazz theory and some jazz piano. But really, I still felt like something was still, I was kind of on a search to find my own style. And North America is just so good for jazz. So that was one of the reasons actually why I wanted to go to Canada, because I figured there are just so many awesome musicians there and I could develop as an artist.
Since meeting Olga a few years ago, her song style always kind of reminded me sort of like 1920s sort of German cabaret music, you know, almost like you'd see, say, like Marlene Dietrich singing a song in a nightclub in, say, like The Blue Angel or something like that, one of those classic films. So that was kind of like the first impression that I got of her, of what she was bringing uniquely to the table, you know, that you don't hear any other musicians in the Okanagan doing.
Yeah, it was a totally new flavor for all of us anyway, and I think just because of her upbringing, the particular things that she was exposed to, that's what led her to do that. And I kind of get the feeling she's an old soul too, that she just seems to have this ability to write songs that sounds like they're, you know, 50 or 60 years old. It's really fascinating.
Like being an immigrant and, you know, those different experiences, different countries, when you have to abandon all you have, all you know, all your friends, go somewhere else, start from scratch, you know, and then I've done it twice. So for me, it's like I've abandoned lots of people. So it really, you have lots of depth to your character. It kind of starts developing. It's not two-dimensional anymore. And then when you're able to touch somebody and make them maybe remember something of that kind that they experienced, it's just an amazing, powerful feeling. And then really I don't care at that point how many people I have in the audience, because you can have 1,000 people, you can have 30 people you're playing for, but if you touched one person, it's totally worth it.
Here at Kelowna Community Resources, we provide a range of programs to assist newcomers in their adjustment and adaptation to life in the Okanagan. Every day we see and hear of incredible stories, not only of adjustment and acceptance, but also of contribution to make Kelowna a better place for all its citizens. We know that these stories will continue to be lived by those that move to the Okanagan, contributing to our community, making a difference, not only in their and their children's lives, but in the broader community. I feel proud that they choose British Columbia as their new adopted home.